Yay! And we are live. Happy Thursday, happy jueves. Bienvenidos a todos to our weekly Latina mental health series brought to you by Latina professionals. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be with you again every Thursday at 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. For those of you that have been committed and showing up for yourselves and join me in this process of mine, and being able to be here in front of you and just talk about all things mental health. Oops, my light went out. I absolutely love and appreciate your love and support. For those of you that are new, bienvenidos. This is going to be, a 30-minute, presentation where I will be able to talk about, a specific topic. Can't even talk today. A specific topic, and then at the end we'll be able to have a Q&A section as well, just to ask anything about anything that was talked about today. And so I'll give you guys all a moment to come in as the usual. Please let us know where you're joining in from. It's always fun and even like energizing to start the sessions and seeing kind of where everyone is coming from. So where you're coming from, your industry that you're in, and also if you can add, how are you feeling today? Okay, and so because today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. So what better way to start off by first recognizing, right? How are you feeling? Okay, so if you feel comfortable, you can put it in the chat. If not, you just, take a mental note of it. But I want it to be, a specific emotion, right? Not if you're feeling good or bad or fine. No, an emotion like, are you happy? Are you tired? Are you exhausted? Are you energized? Are you excited? Are you motivated? Are you sad? Whatever emotion that you are experiencing, just take a note of that and honor that. Okay. And if you want to share it with us, feel free. I myself, I'm feeling excited, motivated. Um, and it's just always, so fun to be on here and be with all of you that are tuning in from all over the world. I love it. That's like my favorite part of doing these presentations, and even just getting me to continue, coming back every week with you all. All right, so who's tuning in? I see we have some folks from Que Vivan las Latinas, 100%, yes. New York City, Los Angeles, California, which if you guys aren't aware, I do live in Los Angeles, California, so that's where I'm tuning in. So hello to my West Coast people, but also lots of love to the East Coast and all over the world as well. We have Virginia, Chicago, San Francisco. Ooh, someone's feeling energized, overwhelmed, motivated, blessed. More folks from California. Yes, we love our Latina sisters. Chicago. Yes. Exhausted. Yeah, so all different emotions that were coming in, and just to normalize, right? Like, it's okay to have whatever emotion you have, right? We're just honoring them, and it's going to really be important, right? Especially as we dove more into today's topic, which is empowering Latinas, right, to embrace emotional intelligence and enhance communication, specifically focus in the workplace, right? So how we're going to understand our emotions and how that can actually serve us to be able to be better communicators and be more effective in the workplace, but also in all areas of our lives. So awesome. So continue joining in, continue sharing where you're from and how you're feeling today. Ooh, congratulations. Someone's a new mom. Felicidades. I'm just like checking the chat right now. Okay, awesome. So let me just transition here and get this started. All right, what do I want to do? Yes, here we go. Okay, so empowering you to embrace emotional intelligence and enhance communication. Awesome. So I imagine that there was something about, today's topic that really called your attention or that you were curious about, or perhaps because you've been following me all along, you just kind of want to continue, supporting me, which I absolutely love and appreciate you for that as well. Um, or maybe just, to learn more about yourself and just, how your emotions, come up for you. And whatever the reason is, I'm just happy that you're here, right? Take this time, to keep an open mind, be curious, really use the platform to connect, to support each other, right? Because although I'm here providing, the expertise and the insight, right? There's so much that we can also learn from each other through each other's questions, feedback, experiences. So please take advantage of the chat to get to know each other and also to be able to support one another. All right. So who am I? My name is Norma Garcia. I know for those of you that are with me every time, I always introduce myself, especially for those that are new here. I want to make sure that you know exactly who you're in this room with. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a life coach. I've been doing this for the last 10 years, really devoted in mental health, specifically with the Latino community. I'm working directly, with children, teens, adults, professionals, all walks of life. I really, take a cultural sensitive and trauma informed lens when I work with my clients. I understand the importance of culture, right, in the way that we function, our belief system, the way we socialize, the way we make our decisions. So for me, that's really important, and that's what's really awesome about this presentation, right, or this like mental health series that I get to customize and tailor it specifically to us Latinas. I'm also very passionate in empowering high achieving first gen Latinas, women of color, and be able to just achieve, their personal, professional goals, and also to be able to reach your potential and, create a life where you are thriving. And my ultimate mission is to continue advocating for mental health, breaking cycles, and just creating a bigger impact within our community. So, again, thank you all for being here and taking this time with me. So let's get right into it. All right. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a meaningful discussion again on emotional intelligence and culturally aware communication. Our journey of self-discovery it's an ongoing process, right? It doesn't end here, right? It continues going even after today's presentation. And today specifically, we're going to explore how we express ourselves as Latinas. Okay, so what is emotional intelligence, right? I don't know if many of you are familiar with this term or have heard it or know a lot about it. Um, we're all familiar with like our emotions, right? As humans, right? We all have emotions and it's normal and it's okay to have our emotions. We're all allowed to feel the way that we feel, right? The thing with the emotional intelligence, right? This is the ability to be able to understand, right? Use and manage your emotions in positive ways, right? Our emotions, it's not whether they are good or bad, it's whether our emotions are they comfortable or uncomfortable, right? Are we having positive, reactions from our emotions, or are we having negative, reactions? So that's the kind of way I like to look at our emotions. And so being able to have awareness of your emotions, right? Like when you're triggered, what emotion comes up, and even identifying that emotion. That's why today I wanted to start off with you guys just sharing, with me how you're feeling. And something that's pretty common is usually like, you ask like, oh, how are you? How's it going? And usually the statements are, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm all right, right? But that doesn't really describe your emotions, right? Your emotions are what I mentioned earlier, about exactly like how you are feeling, right? Are you sad? Are you happy? Are you mad? Are you exhausted? Are you motivated, right? And sometimes we can have multiple emotions at the same time, right? We can be happy and we can also be sad, and both can be true. So both of those things can exist in the same space. um, and being able to have awareness of our emotions and how we manage them, right? This helps us a lot in our personal but also in our professional lives, in which we're able to communicate better, we're able to have healthier relationships, we're able to be more effective, we're able to set boundaries, we're able to get the things that we need and we want, and even more importantly, we're able to make sure that we meet like our basic necessities. um, And so, with emotional intelligence, here I am going to reference Daniel Goleman. He is a psychologist that actually wrote a book on emotional intelligence. By no way am I sponsored by him or anything of that sort. But as an additional, as a supplemental to what we're going to talk about today, if this is something that you're really curious about and want to learn more about emotional intelligence, I do recommend this book by Daniel Goleman. And so what he did is that he came up with elements that make up our emotional intelligence. Okay, so we're going to go over what those elements are right now. So the first one is self-awareness. And I think self-awareness is something across all boards, right? In order to really understand how to problem solve or how to go about something, how to confront something, right? How to make changes, we always have to have this self-awareness. We have to be aware of what is happening. So here, what Dinah talks about, it's about being able to recognize and understand your emotions, know how you're feeling, and even also knowing how your own emotions also and actions as well, right, affect the people around you, right? If we think about even just the way that emotions come up for us, right? That a situation happens, right? And then we perceive the situation, right? We have an interpretation of how of the meaning that we're making out of the situation. And then from there we have an emotion, right? And based on how we're feeling, right, then that's going to determine how we react or behave. So it's what I call a cognitive triangle, where it's like you're looking at your cognitions, right? The way that you're thinking, that's really affecting how it is that you're feeling. So this first part is again just having awareness of how you're feeling, and for the most part, really paying attention to your body, right? Because our emotions also are manifested in our physiology. So sometimes our body tells us how we're feeling, right? Especially if we're feeling anxious or we're feeling sad or we're feeling mad, right? There's certain things that happen to our body, right? Like it could be that, when you're nervous, you have butterflies. When you're upset, right, your like hands are in a clench. When you're feeling like you're feeling anxious or worried, maybe your heart starts beating fast, or maybe you're feeling sad and you feel like a heaviness in your chest. So it's really important to be able to read and understand your body, because our body communicates to us how it is that we're feeling, right, in different situations. So once you have the awareness, right, you want to be able then to regulate your emotions, right? And you're not going to be able to know how to regulate yourself if you don't know how you're feeling, right? So that's why that first part is really really important. And sometimes it may be that you're feeling something, but you may not be able to know to pinpoint exactly what it is, or understand like, why am I feeling this way, like why am I feeling sad, or why am I mad right now, right? There could be things that are in our like conscious level and unconscious level in those moments, right, where you don't know exactly how you feel, right? Just it's okay. You just know that you're feeling something. And so in that moment, you want to be able to also regulate yourself. And when you regulate your emotions, there's two parts to this. You want to regulate your mind, right? Because again, there's thoughts that are coming up when you're having your emotions, and also your body, right? You also want to regulate your body. And so there's different strategies that you can use to be able to regulate both, right? Like the mind, right? Or like the top down strategies. It's kind of using like your mind in terms of like, how do you relax your mind? How do you reframe your thoughts? How do you look at that situation different? How do you maybe meditate, right? Things that are gonna like really ease your mind. And then your body is doing things like the deep breathing, like the grounding, using your like senses, sometimes even like exercise, right? So things that really help calm those nerves and those emotions that are going through your body. All right, so the next one is motivation. right? So this motivation, this has to do your internal motivation, right? So what this means is your drive, right, to be able to achieve your goals, to improve yourself, right? And it's more for just yourself versus like doing it because you want a reward, right? You just have this self-drivenness. You set standards for yourself and you consistently, work towards that. So it's what I call the internal motivation, this motivation that comes within you, right? With no specific agenda in terms of like, what am I going to get in return? What external validation am I going to get? This is a bit more straightforward. And then empathy, right? This is a huge one, right? Like, how are we empathizing with others, right? And this is an interpersonal skill, right? In terms of like, how can we put ourselves in the situation of others? How can we put ourselves into someone else's shoes? And empathy sometimes can be confused with sympathy, right? Sympathy is more as like when you feel bad for someone, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you, versus empathy, like, wow, I can see how that was really difficult for you. Wow, I can see how that's really painful. Well, you try to understand, right, the situation from their perspective. And empathy can go such a long way. And this is a way that we're able to feel, validated, and feel that we're being heard. And then the last one here is social skills, right? How are you interacting with others, right? Are you a people person? Are your ability to manage, situations, build network, connect with each other, right? And if we're thinking about, right, in the workplace, right, like how are you navigating, communicating, socializing, right, with others, especially, when, let's say, conflicts do rise or there's disagreements, and we'll get more into what that looks like. But just here, pretty much like your own like interpersonal skills in terms of how you're relating with others, not just in terms of like your communication, but also your actions as well. So let me just take a breather here and check the chat to see if anyone has any questions about so far what I've talked about. I imagine that most of you already have heard this, right? So it's about just kind of fine tuning, right? Those areas that perhaps you can work on more. So let me see. All right, so no questions so far. Okay, so now let's talk about emotional intelligence in terms of communication, right? Why is it important? Okay, and so when we have the emotional intelligence, right, those 5 different elements, right, we're able to communicate better. We're able to be more effective. We're able to manage conflicts. We're able to build relationships, right? We're able to be more productive, right? Not just in the work that we do, but even our interactions, right? And one thing to really consider in terms of when we talk about emotional intelligence and communication is also understanding how us as Latinas, right? How do we express ourselves? Right? How do we show our emotions, right? And there's like cultural considerations and nuances that influence, right, how it is that we communicate with others. So in order to understand the emotional intelligence, specifically in our community, we really need to understand like how our culture, how that plays a role, right? And this is even thinking about like, how we grew up, right? Our belief system, our traditions, right? The messages that received growing up from our parents, things like even just our gender roles, right? Especially, if you are like in a male dominant, workplace, right? Sometimes that can be challenging, right? In terms of like, how do you navigate your emotions? How do you express yourself? Even like code switching, right? When we get into like professional roles, right? We may feel the need to have to, switch our language to match the culture of the office or the language that's being used in the office, versus like, what if you just speak from your own authentic self? What if you were to use your own language as you would in like your normal day, right? So even that code switching can be impactful. This idea that, we respect authority, we respect our elders, right? We respect others. And so how that can also show up in the workplace, right? And especially if there's like challenges or there's microaggressions or there's discrimination, right? How can that then impact the way that we're going to express ourselves? face saving, right? Like making sure that we want to be, we want to save our reputation, that we want to save our image, that maybe we don't want to be perceived a certain way. Sometimes perhaps being direct in your boundary or communicating something can be perceived very differently. And also being for us to be able to be like humble, right? And so specifically, as Latina professionals, right, like how do we navigate, right? How do we use our emotional intelligence while still honoring, right, our Latina identity and how we show up? And how do we then, make sure that we, especially in our professions, right, that we are making sure that our needs are getting met, that we're advocating for ourselves, that we're using our voice, right? And also that it's also getting reciprocated, right? And so there's a lot of things that may be out of your control, but the part that is in your control in terms of like how you respond, how you address, right, and how you confront a situation, whether it's a conversation, a boundary, and so on and so forth. Okay. So here I listed a few different things just to be mindful in terms of like your communication, right? To be culturally sensitive in your communication, right? Like you have to also assess, right, your room. You have to read your room and kind of see, who's who, right? What culture do they come from, and the way that also your identity, right? And how you're going to be able to take into consideration, right, that whatever you may say or how you may say it, how that's going to be, perceived in a way, right, that like it's going to be effective for you. Being able to be attuned to the signs of emotions in others, right? Also, not just, paying attention to your emotions, but also paying attention to the emotions of others. So then you know how to react. Tailor your communication style to the preferences and emotions of the other person you're interacting with, right? This can change depending on who you're talking to. Is it your coworker? Is it like your boss? Is it like the chief, right? But even then, like regardless of who you're talking about, for you to still honor, right, your needs and your values and what you stand for. Being able to use I statements, right, to convey how you feel and what you need. Making sure that you're setting boundaries at work, right? That you are defining what your limits are, that you understand, again, the things that you value, like what's important for you, and that you are using your voice, right, to communicate those boundaries, right? Being able to use language that reflects like your awareness of like your emotions, right? When conflicts arise, approach them in a way that's calm and empathetic, right? Paying attention to also like nonverbal cues, like how is the other person, reacting, active listening, knowing that like there are going to be disagreements, right? And how do you respectfully, disagree? Being able to, pause, before you respond. So this is just like an overview of different strategies you can do. Not to say that you are going to use this in every situation, right? The more that you have the awareness and the practice, right, the easier that's going to get for you to really apply your intelligence, right, and to communicate in a way where you're going to be effective, but also be culturally aware of yourself. All right. So here are just examples of different statements for the different areas that we talked about in terms of like the communication, right? So an example of an empathetic response, right? Let's say, for example, a team member shares that they're overwhelmed. And then the way that you respond with empathy, you may say something like, I can understand how challenging that must be. Is there anything I can do to support you, right? Conflict resolution, right? During a disagreement, you remain composed and empathetic, and you say, I understand your concerns, and I'd like to find a solution that works for both of us, right? And then clear communication of your boundaries, right? You communicate your boundaries saying, I appreciate your interest in collaborating, but I'm currently focusing on this project. Let's connect after I've completed it. Okay, so just a few examples, right, of how the emotional intelligence, right, can come through as you're communicating, right? And obviously, in the workplace, there's so many different scenarios in terms of even just like what role that you're in, what kind of dynamic there is in your office, right? In terms of like, the power dynamics as well. So how you use these skills are going to be really specific, to your workplace. But at the end, staying true to, again, your values, right? Your identity, what you stand for, and what you truly, believe in. So with that being said, we have about 5 more minutes. I wanted to leave a room for a Q&A. If anyone had any questions, anything that really resonated with anything or something that made them think about maybe a specific situation in their current workplace, and perhaps could use, additional support and how to address that or use your emotional intelligence to be able to communicate more effectively. So feel free to do that now. Let me look at the chat. Let's see. So here I have one. It says, how can we be emotionally intelligent enough to handle properly overwhelmed feelings and situations? Really great question. And it does not have one straight answer, right? Because there's different layers to this, right? The emotional intelligence, right? It's going to be different for everybody, right? Because we all have different emotions and we all experience the emotions differently, right? So the emotional intelligence, the way that you're going to rate it is like yourself, where you feel that like you were able to have awareness of your emotions. And let's say your emotion is you're feeling overwhelmed, right? In that moment that you're feeling overwhelmed, right? What can you do to regulate yourself, right? Typically with like situations, right? The way that I like to look at them is in the situation, right? Can we problem solve this? Are there solutions to resolve the situation or the problem, right? And if there are solutions, right, then I would go to that, right? Okay, let me think of solutions. How am I going to resolve this? How am I going to make this better? However, sometimes the situation has no solutions, right? Or maybe you've exhausted your solutions and nothing has changed. The other part too is then how do you regulate what's coming up for you, right? How do you accept that situation and regulate the emotions that are coming with it? So it's really about like assessing, right? In terms of like yourself, but also the situation, right? And seeing like what part of you can you control and what part is out of your control, right? So a lot of that too is like really thinking about how you regulate yourself, and regulating yourself can also be, not just in the moment, right? Not just in the moment when the emotion happens, but, on a daily basis that you're already, doing like self-care strategies, right? That you're taking care of your mind, your body, your spirit, your physical, your personal, your professional, that's already like part of your routine, that even when you are triggered or you do have your emotions, right? Because you already have this sense of knowing how to regulate yourself, those emotions may not be as intense. All right. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, if anyone else has any feedback and maybe sharing what they've done or what's worked for them, please share it with us. We would love to hear it as well. All right. So we have another one. Ooh, how do you apply these to an on-the-spot situation like experiencing microaggressions at work? Really great question, and this is this is one situation where I think the emotional intelligence you want to use in an effective way. So microaggressions, it is something that happens at work more often than not. So when I think of microaggressions, right, in the moment, right, I'm sure the automatic response is going to want to be to react, right? So with the emotional intelligence, right, it would be, having that awareness, kind of catching yourself like, okay, right now this happened, this is triggering me, this is how I'm feeling, right? So in that moment, right, being able to perhaps, what can you do there? Can you remove yourself from the situation? Can you take a moment and pause, right? Can you, is there a way that perhaps you first regulate yourself and then be able to address it later? So just because maybe not in the moment, you're not reacting doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a chance for you to come around again and then address it. Because when you address the microaggression, You want to do it when you're calm. You also want to do it when the other person is in a place that they're going to be able to receive, those emotions. So taking a pause or stepping away for a moment, right? That's just buying you some time to regulate yourself. Doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel the way that you feel, right? Like if there's a microaggression, I only imagine you're going to be like mad, pissed, upset, which you're allowed, right? But the reaction that's going to come from that, you want to make sure whether it's going to be productive, right? And when there are microaggressions, those are also opportunities, to be able to educate and teach, right? Others in terms of like, hey, like this is what happened, like, this is how I feel about it, right? You can set some boundaries. You can also educate them of why it is that how it impacted you, right? So there's different parts to this in terms of like, taking a moment to pause and react. And of course, this isn't easy, right? In the moment, right, we're just gonna react because that's naturally what we want to do. But you have to think about, right, like in the end, right, what do you want your outcome to be? All right, let me see any other questions. How do we navigate our emotional intelligence when you're passed over in a male dominated industry when staying composed and humble? Wow, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. And it's really hard, right? Especially because, you know, men and women think very differently, especially when there is like a power dynamic, right? And so the thing with in these situations, right, we can only control ourselves, right? What they do, what they think, what they say, right? Although we can try to shape them, right? If when we try to educate and teach them on certain things, right? But ultimately it's about, you being able to just regulate yourself, right? In that moment. Now, if it's something that continues to happen, like I would, that's where, your boundaries come in, having a conversation about it, right? And at the end, right, who knows whether that's going to, create an impact or not. But the important part is here that you're using that emotional intelligence to benefit you and to keep you in a state as much as possible to be calm and humble, right? So it's not easy to do, right? Unfortunately, well, I'm not in a male dominated profession. I'm actually in a woman dominated profession as a therapist. So I can't say I relate to that specifically. However, in working with clients that are in that situation, a lot of it is, in terms of like you thinking about your actions for yourself, right? The impact it's going to have on you versus the impact that it's going to have on them, if that makes sense. Yeah, none of this is easy. You can have all the emotional intelligence, you can do everything right. Doesn't mean that the person is going to reciprocate. Doesn't mean that the person is going to respect that, right? So if it gets to that place, right, where it's at the cost of your own mental, emotional well-being, right? It's perhaps reevaluating, right? Like, does this profession, does this job, like, does it align with my values? Does it align, with what's important for me, right? So just a question to think about, right? If it's a recurrent thing that there isn't a way to resolve or like, or get through it. All right. So um, it's already 5:30, but I'll stay on to answer a few more questions. And so yes, the presentation will be shared. If you can just DM me your email address on LinkedIn, I'll be more than happy to share it with you. And then I think I have one last question here. What is the best way to respond to your own feelings of rejection, sensitive dysphoria? Those are a lot of words in one sentence. Can you please help me clarify that question a bit more if you're still on here? Best way to respond to your own feelings of rejection, sensitive dysphoria. Yeah, so if you're still here, Hamara, can you please clarify that? If not, I can definitely, take this conversation or chat later on. All right. Awesome. All righty, guys. Well, Thank you all for being here. It was truly such a great, conversation, and just to be able to have this awareness, right? And how using this to our benefit, right? So that we ourselves can be the leaders that we want to be, create the change and impact that we want to make, even if it's like small little changes and wins, to really honor that. So with that being said, hopefully you all have a wonderful day. If you want the presentation again, please send me your email address. Um, Other than that, I will see you guys all next week. You guys have a great night.